Hi there, my name is Kelly Cody Grimm.
And I'm Max Grimm.
And we are Creative Actors Lab. What we want to do is just talk a little bit about how you can bring creativity into your everyday life. Hey everybody, it's Kelly.
And Max.
And again, we are back for another podcast.
Once again.
What we thought we would talk about today is...
Oh, it's the necessary evil called auditioning.
Yes. And Max is going
to... Oh, I might have an opinion or two about this. We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. Basically. Okay, here we go, folks. Buckle in.
Buckled.
I will say this. Probably first, for all the things of acting and the whole process, that so many things I have loved so much over the years. One of them is not auditioning. And I'm saying that from the actor standpoint, also from the director standpoint. I just, it's something I've always personally really always struggled with. When I was a young actor, this would be back in the early to mid 1980s, before such things as, the internet, because that's, that internet sure is kind of a game changer, ain't it, kids? But, you had to actually show up to go to somebody's office. And if you were doing theater back in the day, depending upon what show it was, you generally had to have two monologues, one comic, one dramatic. Mm-hmm. Some of the bigger places, you actually would have to have four monologues altogether, a contemporary drama, contemporary comedy, and classical. It's like a dramatic and a comedic classical. And I saw an audition recently. It's like one of the monologues needs to be Shakespeare, and specifically in verse. And sometimes if you want to get really crazy about it, you also had to have 16 bars of a song, even if you weren't auditioning for a musical. If you were auditioning for a musical, you probably had to have your monologue and a couple of different songs. Mm-hmm. So it could be very arduous, and and film was a different thing. You generally would have to do your monologue, and then if you got a call back, that's when you would get a cold reading, and the readings would be extremely cold readings, in that sometimes you weren't even given your sides a day before or any of that. You pretty much walked in and you got to look at your script, and you had maybe 3-4 minutes, and then it's like, okay, and go. So it could be very, very nerve-wracking. And I will say this for myself. The problem I've always had with auditioning in that way is that it doesn't really give you as an actor a chance to really show what you can do under real circumstances. Mm-hmm. And as a director, which is where I particularly got a real distaste for the auditioning process, was there were people out there who they could audition their little butts off. They could audition so well. I mean, they had their monologue. They could do it backwards and blindfolded in the dark with a bad case of the flu, and they'd be brilliant. And then there were other people, which I would fall into this category, is I would generally get very anxious. I would overthink it. Especially when you're auditioning for a director that you do not know. And they just get very nervous. You'd be in, not even on a stage. You'd be in somebody's office, standing like 5 feet from these people, and just doing your monologue or doing whatever. And the problem that I have with auditions, both from the standpoint of the actor and the standpoint of the director, is you don't really get a particularly clear view of what the actor is capable of. Some people are way more comfortable in an office with a couple of people sitting behind a desk and they do their monologue. Other people like me, I just find that very nerve-wracking. And it's just, auditioning was always the thing that it was probably my weakest part of me as an actor. And when I started directing, there was this a book written back in the I guess it was in the late 70s, early 80s. Book was called Audition by Michael Shurtleff, and I'm not I'm not gonna talk smack and dog on Michael Shurtleff or the audition book or the process, but it became really, really, really popular amongst actors in general. They had these Michael Shurtleff audition certified coaches. They had these programs, all across the country, and people would show up for these, intensive workshops, and they'd buy the book. And granted, the Michael Shurtleff, as I understand it, he was involved with Broadway back in the 60s and 70s. He cast a lot of really big shows back then. So when it came to auditioning, he knew what your usual run-of-the-mill directors who were doing the usual type of shows being done back then. He knew what they wanted to see. I can think of one person in general from back in the day, not to mention names, but this person, I remember she auditioned for me, and oh my Lord, she could audition. But I mean, when it came to actually acting and doing the part, she was a train wreck. She was it was.
In the parlance of Only Murders in the Building, Paul Rudd's character, was she a stinkeroonie?
Oh, she was terrible. She was terrible, terrible. I had actually seen this person do a play in a local theater, and no, I don't, just to be direct about it, she just flat out stank. The performance was god awful, and I'm like, how did this person get cast? I mean, good Lord, she was abominable.
I actually worked with the same person when I worked with the improv troupe in Miami.
Yeah.
And we kind of found the same thing, so very similar experiences. Yeah. Nice lady.
Lovely person.
We would say, bless your heart. She meant well.
No, but I saw her in this particular play that I also had auditioned for, and I didn't get in. And then I saw and it was a 2-person play, and I remember seeing the play and going, "Thank God I did not have to play opposite this person," because it was just the performance just stank to high heaven. It was horrible. But I think not to belabor the point, but the performance was terrible. I was like, how did she get cast? And then I started my own company, and the same person came in to audition for me, and I'm like, she's wonderful.
Where have you been?
I mean, I'm just looking at her going, and she turned out she was kind of one of these Michael Shurtleff audition trained people, and that's as far as her training went. That was it. She did not go through with the rest of the classes or the training or the voice lessons or the scene study or the movement or the pantomime, no script analysis, no camera technique, no nothing. She did the Michael Shurtleff audition thing, and that was it. And that particular program back in that period of time was so popular. So many actors were taking it, and I got to the point as a director to where I became very distrustful of the audition process, because I had seen these people. I mean, they could audition, but they just couldn't do the performance. And it's one of those things like, you're going to get your foot in the door, but once you get your foot in the door, you better have some chops, kiddo, or you're not going to work much.
You got to not only get your foot in the door, you've got to walk through the door and be able to make your entrances and exits. Probably. Yes.
And that was the problem. And it's just, to me, how I started to cast people is I was going out to actual shows, seeing people in doing the actual thing, and then walking up to them later and said, "Hey, would you like to come and read for a part? Don't worry about a monologue. Don't worry about, you don't need 16 bars of a song. You don't have to do a Shakespearean verse. You don't have to do a drama or a comedy. It's cool. Just, come on in, do a cold read. We'll do some improvisation." And that to me was really the way to really see if you could really cast the person and they were going to be able to come in and play nice with your fellow actors, and do crazy things like listen and and know how to develop a character, and whatever your method, in quotes, whatever your method or your approach or your process to acting, that you had that in place. Not the, I know how to ace the job interview, because basically that's what an audition is. It is a job interview. And the way that is primarily done, in my opinion, is not a particularly effective barometer of someone's talent or their ability to actually create and fulfill a character and give a compelling performance and be a good part of the ensemble. You don't get any of that in the standard audition process, and I will tell you, I think it's very it's very a very counterproductive way to do things. One of the things that I really came to hate about the audition process is that there were directors, and there were quite a few of them back then, and it's still the same way now. I have no doubt about that. But these directors, they knew exactly who they were going to cast before the auditions even started, and for whatever reason, they would have to go through this audition process and have a bunch of people come in that they knew perfectly bloody good and well they weren't going to cast. They knew exactly who was going to play what part and who wasn't going to be there, but you had to go through these things anyway. And that's something that I used to get so frustrated about that. And this is a bit of an extreme example, but one where I went to school, the main stage productions, basically it was the same bunch of people who got cast in every show every time, whether they fit the character or not, whether they, and it didn't make any difference. They were just going to get cast, and the rest of us could, go hang lights and pull curtains and all that, which is all very important, but we never had a shot in the first place. And I just found that just very, I just found it just a huge waste of time. It was at first I found it to be very insulting and demoralizing, and it just did absolutely nothing for the morale of the other people. And I can remember actually there was a show that was being auditioned for. It was True West by Sam Shepard, and the two main characters. It was a 4-character play, but there were these 2 main characters. And I remember myself, and honestly, I could still play that particular role. But there was myself and this other guy that we were friends and we were scene partners, and we had, we were in the same classes, and we're like, True West, dude, we got to audition for this. And it's like, yeah, we got up there, we did this blowout audition. The next day, guess what? 2 guys got cast who got cast in every show, and it just got to be this thing where we would all be in the theater, everybody's auditioning in front of everybody else. And I saw the audition they did, and they could have given a bloody crap about their performance. They walked through it. They were goofing around. They were blowing lines and just doing this really very sloppy, very undisciplined thing, and just laughing about it, going, we're going to get cast anyway. We don't have to try. And the attitude was they weren't being subtle about it at all. And the next day, the casting list goes up, and guess what? Guess who got cast? Not me and the other guy. This had happened so many times that I just said, you know what? I really want to do this. I really want to work. I really want to be up on stage. It's not going to happen here because I'm just not one of the pets. I'm not one of the clique. And I just got very, very frustrated about it. So I sort of walked out, and I was really fuming mad. And so the next day I came back and I walked up to the instructor who was directing the play, and I was like, I just want to let you know, I'm not going to audition for a thing for you guys ever again, because this is frustrating. It's a waste of my time. It's insulting. And I just don't know what else to do about this. And he gave me this answer of, well, casting a play is like dialing a phone number, and you need the right set of digits. You need the right set of numbers to actually make the phone call to the person that you are trying to get to, that you intend to get to. And if you put in the wrong numbers into the phone, you're going to get a wrong number. To which I said, oh, yeah? So the same people get cast every single time. And I don't care what the show is, it's the same people every single time. And why don't y'all just come out and have the balls to say, you know what, the rest of you guys, you just don't have it. It's like, oh, no, no, we can't do that. And I was like, oh, really? Well, I guess you're doing this because you're just trying to keep your job. And I was really mad. And frankly, I thought I had every right to be. And I never auditioned for anything ever again there. So the same professor, maybe a couple of years later, he wound up getting into this one-man show at a local theater. And I really, really liked the guy. I went to see the show, and this is a whole other story. But he was directed really badly. The script was not very good, and I was actually sitting in the front row, and it was painful. It was painful to watch. And after the show, I walked up to him and I shook his hand, and he just looks at me. He's like, "The show's terrible." It's like, "This show's terrible," and he's like, and he said to me, the thing about it is, I've been teaching at this college for so many years, and he said, I've been sitting in my ivory tower, is what he actually said. And it's like, I didn't realize, you and some other people like you, I mean, you get up there, you put yourself out there, you get very unfairly criticized. You do all of that. I had forgotten how difficult and humbling this process of acting can be. And I had forgotten that. It was very gracious of him to say that, because I regained a lot of respect for him for saying that.
It's very rare that someone will actually say to you, yeah, I was kind of a jerkwad and now I've been smacked around and now I realize that, hey, maybe I didn't see everything and I didn't appreciate the people that were there to try to show us what they had. And now I'm in the same situation and I know I'm not doing what I need to do. And I think that you don't get that very often from someone who's had that. And, in a way, I guess, would you look at that as a gift?
Yeah, yes, I would.
Okay.
I mean, and there was another particular story that I had. I auditioned. There was this person. Again, I'm not going to mention names. This particular person is no longer with us. So, with all due respect and rest in peace. But this person came to South Florida and opened a repertory company. And it was in all the newspapers, and the city government was, rented, or had this old church that they had totally rebuilt over just for this person to start their theater company. And it was in the newspapers, and this person, and I'm going to air quote here, was called a jewel of the American theater, and it was a big deal. And I went in and auditioned, and I'd come to a point in my own acting and my own frustration with auditions that I just was like, I just don't care anymore. I'm going to go in there. And I had a particular monologue that was pretty outrageous. And I just did not give a darn about anything. And I was like, I'm just going to get there. I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to blow the roof off the joint. And if I get the part, fantastic. If I don't get the part, terrific. Whatever. I'm going to do what I do, and whatever the consequences are, it's all good. So this person and her associates were sitting there watching my audition, and they're like, wow. And so they started doing this audition process with me, and I forget what the show was exactly, but the scene in particular that we were reading actually had to do with being in this like evangelical sort of tent ministry sort of thing, and my character was sort of getting up, and I'm gonna prostrate myself before the Lord and all this. It was very histrionic and emotional, and they got me up there, and in the course of one line, they wanted me to on the first four words play one emotion, on the next three words play a totally different emotion, and on the last, three or four, whatever it was, words play a totally different emotion, all while I'm like crawling on the ground and screaming and yelling and, gesticulating and all this. And I just remember walking out of that place just perspiring. I just, and I did not get the part. And I remember some people who did. And after the fact, I remember just, a bunch of actors hanging out, and they started talking about what their experience was like working with this particular person, this jewel of the American theater in air quotes. And I'm hearing these horror stories, and there was this, it was a female running the company, but there was a certain amount of sexual harassment going on. There were just some very, very cruel things were being said in place of notes that you just don't speak to people like that. As human beings, you don't say some of these nasty things that they told me that had been said, but especially not to an actor who is trying to develop a part. That's not how you bolster confidence. That's not how you further the creative process. And it was very abusive, and there was some problems with getting paid. And and I just remember hearing that, and I just was like, thank God I didn't get cast in that thing. Mm-hmm. It's the sort of a thing. I guess my point of it is that the auditioning is basically an actor's job interview. And when you go into a job interview for a regular job, you're generally told, you're interviewing your potential employer, as much as they are interviewing you. And maybe you want to keep your eyes and ears open when they're saying things. And if something doesn't ring true, maybe you don't want to work for that company. The same thing applies to actors. However, actors being the sometimes emotional, needy, attention whores that they are sometimes, that whole factor of I'm auditioning them as much as they're auditioning me, that factor kind of goes out the window. And because of that, I've seen some people get into some really bad productions and some really just horrible situations with directors and productions, because they sort of feel like they have to take that self-respect and put it away. Kids, you can't do that. It's such a difficult thing. I heard Jessica Chastain talking about how sometimes with actors that you have to, in one moment, you have to be this business person. And you got to show up on time, and you got to have all your stuff prepared, and you got to do all, and there's this real, logical, practical way that you have to be, but at the same time there's this raw nerve aspect that you have to be, to portray these emotions and carry on with these dramatic instances, and to sort of balance that in equilibrium and in harmony can be very, very difficult. And the auditioning process, particularly if you are auditioning for a narcissistic director, and believe me, there's one or two of those out there.
No.
The whole dynamic can just get totally blown out of equilibrium, and it just makes for very miserable experiences for you, the actor, possibly for the audience, maybe for your fellow actors as well, when you don't walk in with that sense of self-respect and it being a two-way street. And I'll say one also, and I remember you talking about one particular experience you had. I auditioned for a company, and I'll just say this, but as a preface to all this, I personally do not have a problem with anybody and whatever their lifestyle is, whatever their religion, their beliefs, their politics, their sexual identity, their whatever, any of that is, it's all cool with me. What I have a problem with are people who are hypocrites. That's my problem. And I walked in, and basically this was a company run by gay men. All good with me. That's all fine. But basically what would happen, and this is an extreme example, but I saw the same thing play out in different instances and different configurations of people. But basically this, if you were a nice looking young man who could even marginally act, you're getting cast. If you are a woman, you are held to an entirely different set of circumstances for this particular company. And if they liked the woman, they'd be fine. If they did not like and I remember you talking about when you auditioned, how rude they were to you. there's no excuse for that. They would just be very, very judgmental, sitting behind the table and coughing and shuffling the papers and like, oh, yeah, there's, oh, okay, thanks, okay, you just go and leave the script over there. All right, yeah, we'll call you, whatever, you know. And I remember that happened to you. I remember it happened to me auditioning for a totally different company under a different set of, there was a particular clique of people, and you either fit into the clique or you didn't. Your talent made no difference.
Yeah. And, just to get back to that, a lot of times they will say, like, the percentage I hear is you might get maybe one part. You may go out on 10 auditions and you may get a call back once or twice.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, you may, you're looking at anywhere from 5 to 10%. So you're going to get rejected way more than you are going to actually get told, hey, let's do this. I was actually listening to Jenna Fisher on The Office Ladies, and she was talking about her book, An Actor's Life. And she used one example in there of an audition that a friend of hers was going on a musical audition. But rather than it being in a theater, and when we're talking auditions and you're saying offices, kids, there is no reason for you to be auditioning at somebody's condo, at their personal home, or anything like that. Her friend, who is a singer, who is a beautifully gifted singer, does her 16 bars or does, her audition song. And then the guy turns to Jenna Fisher and goes, oh, do you sing? And so she sang this kind of like weird boppy country music song. And so a day or two later, she gets the call, but her friend doesn't. And she's like, well, that's really weird, but okay. So this guy sends her, this is the music I want you to look at. And, the first performance is like Friday. And she's like, Friday? But we haven't rehearsed. That's just really weird. But in the meantime, she's already told her family and her friends that she's going to be part of this girl group. It's all girls and everything. And she's super excited. And again, her friend's kind of like, I'm glad you got in, but that's just weird. So when she goes that Friday to do the rehearsal, and this is in air quotes, happens to notice that a lot of the girls in the girl group are walking around in lingerie. Well, you had Madonna, there was very much that kind of like corset look and things like that. But she's like, well, how do we sing? How are we going to do this? How are we going to harmonize? And she had a lot of questions. And so the guy said, well, we have a show for a bunch of foreign businessmen, and they're not all that picky about how the music is, but we do encourage you to entertain them after the show. And so she realized she had just auditioned for a call girl ring. And she got out of there as fast as she could. But unfortunately, there is a lot of that out there, too. I think it's a little bit, the Harvey Weinstein scandals, I think, have really shined a light on that. You just had the Danny Masterson scandal, and that's actually brought down a few people. So what I would tell you is, as far as auditions goes, they should be in at least a theater or an office. If somebody wants you to come out to their home, no, that is more than likely a scam. In another video that I did called Actor Be Aware, anytime somebody walks up to you in a mall and goes, hey, you know what? I have a talent agency and we're looking for new talent. And I've seen you walking around here. I really think you could be good. Well, kids, here's the 411. Most talent agents and casting directors have way more actors than they know what to do with. Hence you might get one out of 10 auditions. They're not going to be soliciting people in malls to try to get them to sign up. So that's a flag sign. The whole, and then let's put up a runway in a mall to show you our talent. And then we're going to be taking headshots in the mall and it's going to cost you a couple of $1,000s. That's all a scam. So, be aware of some of those audition scams. I know you had used when you had gone into a casting office and you were told that clothing was optional.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. I got told by an agent one time that I would book way more stuff if I got my breasts done, i.e. a boob job. So, there's a lot of that out there too. And I think particularly what we're seeing with the strikes right now, And the reason why there are actors unions is unions, the best definition, particularly actors unions I've heard, is they protect actors from their own generosity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because otherwise you would have people constantly taking advantage of you. And, those are the things just to be aware of. Now, the good thing about where we are right now is that you can do video auditions. So people will send you sides if you're going through Actors Access or Backstage, Casting Networks, whichever it is. So you can submit, you can look, unlike when we were doing this in the 80s and 90s, you really couldn't go on the internet and look up the casting directors. There wasn't an IMDb where you could sit there and go, what exactly have they done? But now you have that option. So if you are on something like Actors Access and then you do submit your demo reel. Now I will talk about demo reels. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about the audition process, what is good about a demo reel is you actually have control, just as you would with the monologues and doing those live. You have with the demo reel, you have a monologue. I strongly suggest doing one that is original. There's this one place it's a blog that has a lot of monologues on them. Those places a lot of people get their monologues out of. So my suggestion is if you have a screenwriting person that would like to write you a monologue, if you want to write yourself a monologue, that's a two-edged sword, because then if they ask you, oh, well, that was an interesting monologue, where did that come from? You're like, oh, I wrote it. They might go, oh. Then you can't memorize other people's stuff.
Yeah.
So that can be a real... I've written hundreds, our team, Danielle and Amber and I have written hundreds of monologues. So me doing one of mine's not a big deal, but those are the things that I think can sometimes showcase you. And then what's nice is as you're getting booked and you can take little snippets. So then you kind of have like a best of reel. You've got that demo reel that shows you in an action on a medical show. I mean, my demo reels got me in different situations. So then you can actually hand somebody that rather than depending on the fact that they'll come to the theater and see you live. But to me though, just getting up and doing an audition in a theater, when we were watching Only Murders in the Building and you saw like Meryl Streep come out and she was auditioning for The Nanny, and just you saw Martin Short in the theater and just her going and doing this wonderful monologue in a theater. It's like, you can sit there and put your backdrop on and then, record yourself and take the best one, but it doesn't replace being able to be up in front of a group of people or even one person and auditioning for them. So that's a little bit of nostalgia there. But I mean, where we are now, is at least you can look up some of these production companies, make sure that they're legit, see what their Better Business Bureau rating is. There was this one guy I was doing a pitch for, and this particular guy was, in front of a group of people. He was a little rude. When I ended up looking him up, he didn't even have a social media presence. He did not have a website. And I'm like going, how did the guy even get in the room? I think he conned his way into the room, frankly. But it was easy for me to be able to look and go, okay, if this guy kind of wants to contact me, it's a no deal. And actors, at least now you have a little bit more in your arsenal than when we very first started, but people will try to take advantage of you at auditions. And you just need to know what to look out for. And sometimes, like you were talking, like narcissists who want to just tear you down. Nobody has the right to do that to you. And, people go, well, that's show business. It's like, I'm sorry, they don't. And again, Harvey Weinstein, his defense was, well, I'm a guy from a different time. And, you used to be able to chase your secretary around the desk and it was hilarious. And it's like, no, that was never okay. As actors, what I would tell you is if you're going into something and it doesn't feel right,
get out.
Yeah, get out. Yep. There's a reason for that. And, prior to that, do your research. That's what the internet is for. And if you're not finding, like particularly this guy who excoriated me when I was doing my pitch, and later, and I felt, and again, this was like, about 7 or 8 months ago. And I felt a little hurt by that. But then when I tried to look him up, I'm like, okay, this guy has absolutely, for all this, oh, I've gotten funding for this and this and this. It's like, why don't you have an IMBD page? Why don't you have any social media? Why aren't you bragging on all the stuff that you have funded? Well, because he didn't. And he just BS'd his way in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of that too. But, again, getting back to your gut is your second brain. And if your gut instinct's going, oh, I'm getting the heebie-jeebies, heed that.
Yeah.
Please, please, please.
Yeah. Because, I mean, so many people get into, particularly when you're first into this, I mean, it's like you just want to get up and do this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And so things like, common sense and intuition and self-respect sometimes tend to take a back seat to, I just want the part.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I've been there. You have to treat this like a business and not let yourself get carried away and let other people's opinions sway you one way or the other.
I coached a young man, and his monologue, he wanted it to be, he had a general monologue from us. When he found out that, yes, some people did write their own monologues, then the one he wrote was Spider-Man themed. And his slate was all about Spider-Man. And this was not, it'd been one thing if he was like 7 or 8 years old, it would have been kind of adorable, but this guy was in his 20s. And I kept on trying to gently explain to him, it's like, you're at the beginning of your career. I could be wrong. I never discount that, but I doubt seriously that they're going to hand you the Spider-Man franchise. You may really, really want it, but just if you can get on a Spider-Man set and just watch and see how it's done, but if you're going to be that guy that's going to be going, I could do that better than them, that's not going to do it.
Yeah.
But what would scare me is if he got somebody that said, yeah, I saw your Spider-Man stuff. You know what? I am working with Marvel. We'd love to have you come and do something. Actually, you know what? I think we could probably do a sizzle reel of you as Spider-Man, and it would only cost you a few $1,000s.
Yeah. There's that too. Once upon a time, I worked with a guy. Tall, good-looking guy. He, it would be a great model in it, but just zero experience. And somebody literally walked up to him on the street and said, "Hey, are you a model?" He's like, "Well, I work for such and such agency, and we can get you started in this, and we can represent you, and we can do all this." And the guy's telling me all this stuff, and I said to him, "Okay, so how much is that going to cost?" And he goes, $4,000, and I'm like, "No."
And this was what, 1980?
No. This was in the early 2000s, actually.
Yeah.
That stuff goes on. Do not pay to audition. Do not pay to audition. I mean, I can tell you just some other. I remember doing these like group auditions at these conferences, to where it's like you're in front of like a room full of people. I remember doing one at a hotel, and I got up. And I was standing in a line. They were taking in like 10 actors at a time. You stand in a line off one side of the stage, and then you've got 60 seconds to do your monologue. You stand on like the little tape mark X in the middle of the stage. And I got up there, and as soon as I opened my mouth, there was an echo that you couldn't hear out in the audience. You couldn't hear it out in the seats, but up on stage, I have my voice like echoing back at me 3 times with every single thing I said. And that was very distracting, and it's kind of like, okay, I need to get my bearings here. I remember another time doing another group audition like that, and I had driven from Miami to it was the west coast of Florida, and I drove up. I made that several hour trip late one night, got to the hotel late, had to be at the audition early. I was just tired. We're standing in the line, and there was a guy also from Miami standing in back of me, and who could not shut his mouth. And he's like, and he's telling me all these stupid jokes, and I'm just trying to, before I get up on stage, it's like, let me just kind of take a minute and just kind of get quiet and, focus upon what I'm doing and do that. And he would not shut up. And it was like, and he's like, tapping me on the shoulder, and go, "Hey, did you hear the one about?" And I'm just like, "Dude, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to take off my shoe and stick it in your mouth if you don't shut up." And that was like that for like the however long we were standing in line. And there was a lady I knew who had a children's theater, and she was one of the people that we were auditioning for. And I felt like my audition at that was bloody terrible. And so afterwards, we're in the hotel lobby, and she walks up to me. She's like, "Max, how do you think you did?" And I was like, "I'm never doing this again. I'm never auditioning like this again, ever, ever." It's like, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I made a long car trip late at night. I had to be up really early. And then I've got this moron standing in back of me the whole time who's just insistent upon telling me stupid jokes. I will never do this again. I thought my audition sucked. To answer your question, she's kind of like, "Yeah, there's all kinds of things out there that I guess the point of all of this, aside from the fact that I just auditioning was, everybody in that comes into acting, there'll be some part of it. It's not the typical methods of auditioning never worked for me, not as an actor, not as somebody who was casting a play. It just, that approach never worked for me. And the whole cattle call experience was always miserable and frustrating and a waste of time and all of that. But the point of it is that, when you're going out to audition for these things, you've got to use your intuition. As we say, if your gut tells you this is not right, get out. Mm-hmm. If you're going to be dealing with people who are narcissistic and they're going to try to take advantage of you, or they're going to try to talk you down, yeah, because it's one of those things. Like one of the uglier parts of human nature is, rather than somebody trying to make themselves a better person by doing good things and enriching themselves, they put other people around them down. Mm-hmm. And you do run into that quite a bit, and actors can be so susceptible and fragile to that sort of a thing, because you'll want the part, you'll want to get up and do it, and it can be a very, very, very difficult learning curve to get past. So that being said, I certainly hope you don't encounter any of this stuff, but just in case you do, trust your gut, mm-hmm, self-respect, and, it's like anything else. You show up on time, you do the best you can, you respect the people around you, and you do what you have agreed to do, and you hold up your end of the bargain. It's like that with acting or any other thing. And for some reason with actors, that stuff just kind of goes out the window, and they allow themselves to be taken advantage of or put in positions where they're very vulnerable, and they're going to get ripped apart, or they're going to get
ripped off,
or any amount of things. So that being said, kids,
just be aware.
Learn from our experiences.
And what I will do is, in the notes, I will put a link to the Actor Be Aware and some of our other lessons on the Creative Actors Lab website. But the Be Aware really does talk about the different types of scams that you might run into, as far as agents and casting directors and things like that goes. But don't let it sour you on your craft. In fact, I will tell you, one of our friends actually has a website called Weekly Audition. I'll put that link in there too. What's cool about Weekly Audition is you can practice auditioning every week. You get a fresh script, and it can be either a monologue or sides with one other person. You can read it with another person, record it. What's nice is, unlike when you are auditioning with sides from movies that are proprietary and, they won't want you to put that out, these you can put out on social media, you can get feedback. So it's a pretty good service, and I will include that link as well.
And we're not getting paid to say that either.
No, he's a friend that helped us produce the Demanis and also the campaign tweets. So Brett Newton, he's a good guy.
He is.
Adorable daughter and lovely wife. So that's our little shout out to Brett.
So on that note.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much.
I hope all this is helpful.
Yeah, and has given you something to think about.
Indeed.
Right. And again, thank you guys, and we will see you next time.
Until next time, my friends.
We appreciate you guys tuning in, and keep in mind that you can catch us on our social media, Creative Actors Lab on Instagram and Facebook, and by the same name on YouTube. And for more on what we do, you can go to our website,
creativeactorslab.com, all one word. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, make art, not war. Much love until next time.